Tēnā koutou and welcome to the Newsmakers interview on Country 99 TV. News the Crafar family farms have been placed into receivership has come as no surprise to many. The business had grown from a single property 15 years ago to become the country's biggest family dairy operation, with 22 properties, 20,000 head of stock, 200 employees and an estimated $200 million debt. Crafar's charismatic boss, Alan Crafar, had featured in the headlines for all the wrong reasons, culminating late last month in a video of malnourished bobby calves that shocked townies and farmers alike. Bernard Hickey, the editor of interest.co.nz, worked closely on the Crafar story, and he joins me now. When did you first hear of Crafar Farms, Bernard?
Well, about 3 months ago, many of our readers on our website who were talking about the high debts in some of these huge dairy farming operations started to talk about the Crafar Farms problem. And we have a lot of people who comment on our stories, and a couple of them started to comment about some of the animal welfare issues on the Crafar Farms operation. And so we kept an eye on that. Many of our best tip-offs actually come from our readers, which is great. And interestingly, over the last couple of months, we started to hear a bubble of concern about what was going on at Crafar Farms. And one of our readers said that they had taken a video of some animal neglect at one of the farms. We started to investigate this more, and then we went actually down to one of the Crafar Farms. We collected
this was at where? In the South Waikato?
Yes, Bennydale, in between Tokoroa and Taupo, I suppose you could call it. Quite remote, used to be a bull beef farm that's been converted into a dairy farm with 1,800 cows. We went to have a look at this video and then to have a look at the farm. And as soon as we saw the video, we realised that this was a major story, that we had a real problem here. So we went onto the farm to have a look, and we turned up, and immediately the farm manager who was there at the time told us to F off, frankly.
I can imagine.
And then proceeded to punch our photographer.
Oh, really?
So we left pretty quickly, and eventually did some more investigation, found out that MAF had been on the farm just a few days earlier, had destroyed a lot of bobby calves that had been left to essentially starve to death because they hadn't been taught how to feed by people on the farms. And then we published the story. We also worked with Close Up to make sure that they put the story up as well. And it exploded, really. The level of interest in this story was extraordinary. And it unleashed quite a bit of new information about how some of these huge factory farming operations, most of them are pretty good, to be frank. They're well managed, they've got good people in control, they've got proper corporate controls, proper controls of their managers and their staff. But the Crafar Farms operation was off on another planet, really.
Really?
I heard it described to me a few days ago by Murray Sherwin, the head of MAF, as a $200 million operation. It was run like a corner dairy. And that's the problem. It was a family farm, obviously a pretty good family farm. It had been in the family for a couple of generations. And Alan Crafar, as you described, charismatic character, decided to grow very quickly. And over about a decade, he went on a buying spree, buying up neighbouring farms, buying up other farms that he converted into very large dairying operations.
He must have had some pretty friendly bank managers to do that.
Well, this is the problem. There were 3 banks, Westpac, Rabobank, and PGG Wrights and Finance, who advanced him over $200 million. In fact, in the last week or so, we've worked out that there may even be $250 million of debt involved. And over the period of years, they just kept shoveling more money down his throat to go out and buy up his neighbours. He even had a strategy. He described it as doubling down on debt. I mean, this I think is an unfortunate symptom of an industry that has become obsessed with expanding the amount of land that people hold, expanding the size of the properties, and just doing it all with debt. So the model seems to be, and I think this is dangerous, it doesn't matter whether you make a loss on your dairy farm. It's all about the capital gain, which of course is untaxed. And this was Crafar's approach. Keep buying neighbouring farms, keep investing the bank's money in buying this land, gear yourself up right to the eyebrows, and then when property prices increase, you make a killing on the capital gain. And this was his problem. When he got himself into a little bit of trouble, he just bought more land, took on more debt, and didn't really have the management controls in place to handle that. So, and he told me this on the day that we broke the story, that the problem on his farming group was that people weren't seeing enough of him. He had 22 farms, and he was driving.
He was spread around pretty thinly over
right.
quite a wide area.
That's right. He explained to me how he'd just come back from a 37-hour road trip with his wife, where he'd been to visit every single farm in the space of 37 hours. And that day he was pretty grumpy because he'd lost an hour, which was when the change to daylight saving. So this is a man who believes that he can manage everything himself, which of course you can do when you've got 1 or 2 farms and you've got a couple of sons who are doing things for you. But when you've got 200 staff, 20,000 stock, you cannot manage that all on the back of your hand. In fact, he described how one of his management techniques was to write everything down on a wall calendar, rip it off at the end of the month, screw it up and throw it away.
Oh.
That was his business planning.
Oh.
And what I find stunning on all of this is that the banks did not do some basic research into how this property was managed. Did they actually go and have a look at how these farms were being managed?
But I guess they were lending this money to him when the payout was way up at $7.40 or whatever.
That's right. But if you're being a prudent bank manager, you should be assuming that the payout is not going to stay up at $7 forever. But also you should be doing some research on how the operation is run. You've got a $200 million business. You want to make sure it's got proper corporate controls, proper governance, proper bookkeeping. And as we've discovered now, the receivers have gone in to Crafar Farms. There are some real problems with the information systems inside there. And
have you heard anything from Gordamenta, the receivers?
Yes.
Are they keeping you in the loop?
Michael Stiasny has said they've gone in and they've got some information. But the MAF boss, Murray Sherwin, has said that this essentially was a massive operation run like a corner dairy. You just cannot be managing things by writing things down on a wall calendar.
So how did it work down on the farm, so to speak? I mean, I take it there were no share milkers. It was just managers, is that, or is just managers?
No, there were some share milkers on some of the farms. There were managers on other farms, but it was just too big for Alan Crafar to put it all on his
So no
head.
reflection, would you say, on the qualifications of those people managing the farms?
Hard to tell. What I've been told is that the Crafar Farms operation was the bottom of the barrel in terms of management capability and the management of the quality of the staff. One person told me that people in the dairy industry did not want Crafar Farms on their CVs because if you worked at Crafar Farms, basically no one else would employ you. And that's part of the problem. The quality of the management, given the prosecutions for environmental lapses and the animal welfare problems, meant that no one wanted Crafar Farms on their CV. And the people they got, frankly, were the bottom of the barrel. Many of them were immigrants from India and from Indonesia and from the Philippines as well. And I'm sure they're very hard workers and many of them will be very skilled and good at what they do. But there just isn't the background knowledge and the history of understanding how a dairy farm works. And when you're at a senior level and making decisions and you've got 1,000 cows and something goes wrong, it goes wrong very fast. And that's what we found out over the last week. When the receivers went in there last week and when the MAF inspectors went in, they found that on some farms, particularly one farm on the Central Plateau, where they'd had a drought and a very wet winter and now snow, many of those stock were what they called on the scale of 1 to 5 in terms of their condition. Many of them were below 2.5 and 50 of them had to be put down. That's how bad the management was.
That was just on the one property?
Yes, and there were other problems
So what lay behind that though, do you think? Obviously it was a management problem, but what were they doing wrong?
Well, in many cases they weren't feeding their stock enough. They were overstocking their farms. So when you've got that sort of financial pressure on, not just share milkers but also the owners, you don't put enough money into putting proper feed in there or having enough space, enough leeway in case something goes wrong. And as we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years, when you have a drought, when you have a very wet winter, things go wrong and you don't have that buffer of feed to be able to handle it. And so the stock became very unwell. And then of course you've got this massive problem with bobby calves. When you've got an 1,800 cow farm, more than 1,800 calves are going to come on.
Exactly.
And with the price of bobby calves so low, in some cases between $1 and $5 per bobby calf, it actually doesn't make financial sense to feed them for those 4 or 5 days before you put them onto the bobby calf truck. And so when you've got an operation under incredible stress, poor management, poor staff not being trained properly, financial pressures, then the first thing to go is the bobby calf health. And that's what we found on the Crafar Farms operation.
So these were bull calves, of course, that
Yes.
would be going off to the works. So are you saying the attitude was, well, they're going to be killed in the next